Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, once again, in which I hope is the final video of this series that deals with the victims as well as anything other than the solutions of reparation for these victims. In my last videos, I addressed the white victims of the white matrix and also included them as those who need reparations. Today I'm going to address the black victims, but first I want you to hear a story from the Bible. It's called Lazarus and the Rich Man. For those of you who are already aware of it, maybe this is a reminder to understand the very summation of the story that perhaps eluded you or you have forgotten. Now, there was a certain rich man who ate sumptuously, as the scripture says, that he would fill his whole table with food and of course waste a lot of it. And at one point in time, there was a beggar who was crippled, who had boils and sores on his whole body. His name was Lazarus. And Lazarus had his body, broken body I should say, laid at the gate of the rich man by some people who were knowledgeable of the wealth of the rich man, hoping that the rich man would take mercy and grace upon this poor man. However, this rich man could care less. And in short order, Lazarus died. Now, not too far after that, the rich man died. And the rich man, when he came to his consciousness, lifted up his eyes and he was burning in hellfire. And he looked up out of his misery and he saw Abraham, the father of the Israeli nation, in a place called Abraham's bosom, or what we call paradise, where it was perfect there. And right beside him was a man named Lazarus that he had recognized as being the one laid at his gate. And Lazarus calls to Abraham and says, Abraham, Father Abraham, by the way, this flame is tormenting me, and I just want to be able to cool my tongue. So please send Lazarus to get a drop of water just to cool my tongue from this torment. Now Abraham replied to him and said, listen, you endured good in your lifetime, and Lazarus is now enjoying the good and you the bad. Besides all of this, you and I are in a great gulf, great distance, and even if I wanted to come to you and do that for you, I could not, and neither can you come to me. Now, the rich man then says, okay, but do this. Send Lazarus to my brothers, because I have two more brothers, and tell them not to come here. And Abraham said, listen, they have Moses and they have the prophets to tell them. But the rich man was adamant. He said, they won't believe them, just as I did not believe them. But if you send someone from the dead, they will believe you. And Abraham said, though one was sent and risen from the dead, they still would not believe. Now, you're going to ask me, what does this have to do, Marshall, with reparations for black people? Consider it the two different realities. See, rich man dwelled in his white matrix. He was wealthy. And even in his time, as there were people as close to him as his gate to his own home, he could care less about reality. He dwelt in his own white matrix where life was good. He could eat what he wanted to. He was king among men. But when that reality became reality, and the torment of hell showed him what real reality is, then and only then, he thought, you know what? I want to fix this reality. And the arrogance of this man still didn't even understand the reality when the reality was right there in his face. Because even though Lazarus was clearly in a much better state in this new reality than he himself existed in, he still saw Lazarus as less than him, even asking Abraham to send Lazarus, as if Lazarus was still subject to a person like him. Simply put, even in reality, the true reality, he still didn't get it. And so many people who are stuck in the white matrix today still won't get it. But for those who will get it, those are the people who I'm trying very hard to bring out of the matrix so that you can get it. You see, your matrix is coming down, either in itself, in time, or when reality crushes it. And you're going to have to face reality eventually, sooner or later. So it is better, rather than asking Abraham to send someone back so that your brothers and even yourself can avoid the new hell of reality, maybe it is better to look at the poor broken man at your gate and see the reality that others have recognized, and be a part of the solution in your time before your reality becomes an entirely different reality. And so we're looking at the people of color, supported by so many others who are not of color, being given finally this moment in time when reparations in reality can be achieved in this time. And rather than be a part of the solution, so many are holding on to their white matrix, thinking, well, this is what I got to protect, not knowing that it is going to be tore down, whether you agree with it or not, to be tore down. So, I digress. So I'm going to talk about the black victims who deserve reparation. If I could find a new category of those who do deserve reparations that I have not addressed in this video. I will address that in that time. However, in short summary, let me address those who do. Kind of understood by any person of any sense whatsoever. Since 1609, or I believe 1607 initially, people of color were brought to this country as slaves, whether in the much more preferable slavery of being in a textile company in the north, or the poor evil, pure evil of being in the south, slavery and agricultural slavery. People of color have endured slavery, or as some would say, taxation without representation. You could say the taxation of without representation is something exclusively that a person of black descendant in this country I'm speaking about can say, because nothing says taxation without representation than to have 100% of your money be taxed and to not be represented in a court of law. That was the sentence given to the black slaves born before 1865. Now I want to take this moment to give kudos to those who did not treat their black slaves with the utmost despair and beatings and rapes and such other things. I think it'd be wrong to not acknowledge that there were slave plantations where the people did work and they were not treated, other than their salaries being taken away from them, they were not treated with other demonic activities other than that. And as bad as those things are, to be in slavery, to have your finances taken away, it is at least commendable in some ways to understand that they could have been treated much worse by these people and were not. Whether their consciousness was to themselves or to God, I think we should at least acknowledge that it could have been worse for so many others. As I've already addressed before in one of my videos, the misrepresentation of so-called black slave owners also needs to be addressed, because very, and I do mean very few of the people who were reported as black slave owners were actually slave owners who put in bondage the person whom they owned. I've stated many times that we already historically know that though there were, again, slave owners who literally, black slave owners, put their people in bondage for the benefit of themselves, there were also mostly, almost exclusively, those who purchased their own freedom, or were granted their own freedom, and worked to find their lost spouse, son, daughter, or family member, or even friend, to purchase them. And once they had purchased them, in the books it went down as a slave owner, when truthfully it was a person who had been sold a loved one that they had purchased their freedom for. Now, there are also slaves who are slaves even until today. And I don't even mean the human trafficking and such other absolute atrocities that go on in America and other places. I will save that for another series. But I'm talking about the slavery that continued after 1865. Oh, it didn't appear to be forced slaves. It was just forced slaves. Well, you say, well, wait a minute, how could it be forced slavery if it's not forced slavery? Well, if you read the 13th Amendment, you notice that no slavery was outlawed. Yeah, it was a empty, hollow wording that made people say that slavery had been outlawed when it not only had not been outlawed, but compromised to make sure you understood the parameters have been set to slavery being excusable. Those who endured such things as sharecropping and other things I addressed 2 videos ago, I hope that you would actually go back to that video and look at the things that proved 100% that slavery existed and still exists in the black people community. But I digress. Those people are victims who need reparations from this plan. Another one will be those wrongly convicted of crimes, where you say, because of the white matrix mindset, most people still put reparations simply as money. How's that working out for you? Those are people who have been convicted throughout these hundreds of years in America who were not guilty of a crime. And both them and their loved ones suffered sentences and judgments that affect their people and their families and their generations to this day. Those people deserve reparations. Those excessively taxed with fees. Did you know that Abraham Lincoln, being a tyrant that he was, put the first tax on the American people? I spoke about this in another earlier video about how he wanted to use the tax, of course, to go through the Civil War. So he just simply made an illegal tax. In 1895, however, the Supreme Court at the time, apparently not completely sold out to the globalists, decided that the Abraham Lincoln tax was not constitutionally legal. Of course, by 1913, when they bringing in the IRS and the Federal Reserve and such other institutions to make slaves of all American citizens. Well, then we understood that these people had already taxed and destroyed the lives of many of these people who were former slaves, who were now earning a certain enough income to allow themselves to finally break free of the absolute shackles of slavery, which they did not gain any finances worth noting, of course. So now a nice tax to make sure they can accumulate finances was added. Not only so, the currency back then was not paper currency that we use today. It was gold, silver, and in some cases copper. But under FDR, he actually caused a confiscation of gold in the country. At that time, the value of gold an ounce was $20.75. That means that black slave, who now had an ounce of gold, had put all of his gain of wealth into that gold. And with the tax, and the order rather, to turn in your gold for the currency of that day, the US dollar, if you want to call it that, forced that person to give their $20.75 worth of gold to the US government, who subsequently took that gold and them and the banks put together, raised the price of gold to purchase it back to $35 an ounce, thereby making it something that you're literally taking half of the value, half of the wealth of that slave and others, of course, in less than 2 months. But I digress. Those who, pardon me here for a moment, those who have been, because I'm trying to find a way to say this in a way that is more knowledge known by those who are not aware of this. People and businesses like Black Wall Street in Tulsa in 1921, where blacks, despite all of the deficiencies and all of the odds against them, who had their buildings and their extremely affluent businesses destroyed from the heavens above, if you want to call it that, bombed, as if they were any enemy combatant. I believe it was 500 that lost their lives and 800 were victimized, that were victims or injured, or those numbers were vice versa. They received no justice whatsoever, no court case, no reparations of finances, no reparations of the lives and the heads of households and the moms and dads and the children that they lost. And Roswell and such other things. These people deserve reparations, not only for the slaves that they had, the chains that they had broken as slaves, but also for the monies that they lost, for the victimization of their people, those who were victims. And also, there should be posthumously those who were known 100% to be involved in these murders and destruction of property, for them to be convicted of crime. See, the reality is, many people remember their great-greats and such others as such great people. And they can go back in record and they can show all these great things about this supposedly great person. But maybe they'll think a little differently about it if they see a murder conviction on that person's record, posthumously, of course. Maybe they'll start thinking, well, maybe this person was not as good to others as they were, perhaps, to my family. And finally, those who've been victims to the modern day slavery and Jim Crow laws, like those who are lied about and had evidence planted on them, those who had their ability to vote and to get jobs that are government jobs and such other things, because they were found guilty of felony because of government policies, government criminality, and government collusion of conspiracies. Those are the black victims whom I want to address reparations for. You know, someone would say, well, Marshall, that may not include someone else. Well, please, if that does not include those who you think should receive reparations that are black or people of color, then please let me know. Comment and let me know. I'm not God. I'm sure that there are those in my midst, but I do not believe so. But here's the good thing about something like this. A beginning of a process of a solution does not mean that you're going to end there. You know, for an example, when the Germans started reparations to the Jews, or the Israelis that came out of the concentration camp in, I believe, 1952. Many people thought that it would be a monetary reward and maybe some other small considerations. But Germany to this day give considerations and finances and other things to the Israeli people. We're talking 80 years later, nearly. 80 years later, they're still doing some things as an apology. But not so much of an apology. Here's the interesting thing about this. Germany is doing what's right because they realize that it isn't a net negative to give the finances in the museums and to structure their laws to never again do these things. You know, Germany became the most, and is at this day in the European Union, it is the wealthiest nation in the European Union. Think about that. Germany, which has paid absolutely probably hundreds of billions of dollars by now, and have erected so many different museums and such other things for the Israeli people, and given loans and such other things. And yet Germany did not suffer economically to the point where they somehow broke because they're doing an apology tour. No, in fact, it caused the Israeli people to want to invest in Germany. And Germany's economy has actually grown. Interesting, isn't it? Are people doing that which is right, which appears in some eyes to be, well, a little too much? And yet, they have been the ones who have benefited greatly for having done so in many different ways, and not just money. Because again, when I say the word reparation, I realize that the ignorance of most Americans is so extreme because of their involvement in the white matrix that they have zero idea of what reparation even means. And so we're not here to just throw money at something and say, hey, I raped, killed, murdered, enslaved, taxed without a limit. Here's some money. That should make it right. No, that doesn't make it right. Justice makes it better, but it doesn't make it right. Money makes it better, but it doesn't make it right. Let me be very direct. Nothing that the ones who are responsible for slavery, and I'm not saying whites, I said those who are responsible for slavery. I did not say those who came after slavery, those who did not put people in slavery, the Quakers, or anyone else, anywhere involved in this issue, are people who are responsible. I've said that many times. I'm going to say it again. But I'm going to say it again. Those who are responsible for slavery and the subsequent things I just mentioned, you would never, under any circumstances, be able to make it right. That's impossible. Even if you had a greatest desire to do so, you could never make it right. You can never rebuild the lives that you've stolen, or the rapes, or the loss of judgment, or the destruction of property, or the stolen property, or any other thing. You cannot make it right. You can, however, acknowledge your capitulation in the crime. You can, as we used to say as Christians, grab a hold of the mercy seat. And come with a gentle and a humbled heart and say, a crime has been committed. And maybe I'm not the person who's committed the murder, the rape, to such other things, and the taxation without representation. Maybe I'm part of it. Maybe I'm one who covered it up. Whatever your culpability in the crime, you should just acknowledge your part in it. You should not acknowledge the part of everyone else. Just your part in it. But first you have to be able to admit that you were a part of it. And the very smallest part or the very largest part. And if someone is bringing a accusation to you, having the reasonableness to simply hear what they're accusing you of is an honorable thing. See if you are someone who has done something. Maybe you are not. Maybe you're wrongly accused. It happens in our society. Matter of fact, it happens a whole lot in our society where people are wrongly accused, especially people of color. And guess what? That wrong accusation still leads to convictions, and lives are destroyed. And sometimes you may say, well, I don't get accusations because I'm not a criminal. And that is the reason why I don't get accusations. As a matter of fact, the white matrix has treated me well. I dine sumptuously. Nothing draws near to my household or my gate because I am righteous. And the white matrix is always good to people who are righteous. It punishes the criminal. Well, that might be your matrix today, but your reality is coming tomorrow. And those who are on the right side of reality, those of us who have endured, we want our paradise. We want our Abraham's bosom. So while you fight for your white matrix illusion, we fight for our paradise. Here's a suggestion. Why don't we both fight for the paradise? Because paradise represents not a position in the white matrix. That is an illusion and a lie. But paradise is something that's real and better than anything that is ever promised or lived in the white matrix. And so the victims who are both white and black and Chinese and Japanese and such others, well, the ones who've chosen to live in the white matrix, and those who have no idea they live in the white matrix, and those who have come out of the white matrix. To you all, I'm going to provide a solution to all of this. And I hope that these videos that have brought you to the store of my solutions, or at least my humble suggestion of solutions and reparations, are ones that you will say today and in history, that though it appears they're giving too much to these people, we ourselves see how blessed we have become just for doing that which is right. This is Marshall Sanders. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Have a wonderful day and prepare yourself for paradise.